So hello everyone, welcome to the latest installment of Virtru's CMMC Compass webinar series. I'm Andrew Lynch and I'm glad that everyone's here today. If you're a defense contractor or part of the defense industrial base, you know that protecting controlled unclassified information isn't just a compliance checkbox, it's really the heart of what CMMC is designed to do. Today we're going to cut through the noise and give you a practical, actionable guidance on how to protect and control CUI in a way that supports you through your CMMC journey without disrupting the way your teams work every day. We'll cover the current CMMC landscape, as well as what that means for your organization, and how a few specific softwares can add value with StreamScan and Virtru. We'll review what good CUI protection actually looks like in practice and how to make compliance a strategic advantage rather than just a burden for your organization. We have a great session lined up, so let's dive in. Today I'm joined by Chris at StreamScan. I'll let him introduce himself and his organization in just a few moments. Just a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, we are going to be recording this, so if you need to jump off, we'll send this to you afterwards. Also, if you do have any questions, feel free just to drop them in the chat box and we will address them at the end. We're going to save some time for a live Q&A. And then, of course, if you'd like to request a demonstration of either StreamScan or Virtru, you should be able to do that here or just by visiting our website. So welcome, Chris. Before we get into the meat of things, can you give the folks here an overview of what does StreamScan do and what do you do over there?
Yeah, so StreamScan at its core is a cybersecurity company. So we're based in Canada, so we're across Canada. We started working in cybersecurity from 2011. And since there we've evolved. We were starting off doing just incident response. Now we're moving into compliance projects a lot over the last few years. CMMC has kind of come into play here over the last few years. When we started working on CMMC, actually, it was way too early. It was early 2020, just right after COVID, and everybody was like, "Yeah, sorry, I don't know what this is, and not going to do this." And so it's been a tough couple of years, but it's been picking up, over the last year now with all the new rules coming out and the requirements actually being forced onto contracts and to all the suppliers. So what I do specifically at StreamScan is I'm helping customers, go through CMMC, writing policies, SSP, evidence collection, anything that has to do with CMMC, making sure that they're ready for an assessment and then pass an assessment. So I'm currently an RP. I did the CCP. I'm just waiting on my tier 3, so I'm not sure if I'm 100% allowed to say I'm a CCP yet. So I'm just waiting for that background check to come back.
It's sort of like the conditional pass for those who have been assessed. Cool. So yes, so StreamScan, and this is actually the second series that we've done together, having some mutual clients together. But StreamScan is a little unique, Chris, where you all are offering a software and service that can be used to help meet some of the CMMC controls. But also, as you mentioned, you're actually consulting organizations through their CMMC journey. So could you share kind of what that means and the value that you've seen that's been able to add for companies that you've worked with?
Yeah, so we're an RPO. We decided to get RPO status early on in the process. We were the first ones in Canada to do it. We realized that that puts us at an advantage. And the second part of it is we decided last year to get certified actually for CMMC level 2 for our cybersecurity team and our tools that we offer to our customers. As we know, CMMC is big on compliance, but it's also big on cybersecurity and protecting the data. And by us going out and getting certified, it alleviates that burden from the customers to not have to think about those controls that touch CUI or that protect CUI that we can take over. So we help accelerate the process for a lot of the customers to say, well, hey, about 40% of the controls will be covered by us just by getting our tools. So you don't have to think about that. So lowers the cost, lowers the consulting time. And when you get to an assessment, the assessors look at us and not at you guys for that, for those controls.
Got it. And so what are the main CMMC control areas where StreamScan's platform is directly helping organization check those boxes?
Yeah, so a lot of it is everywhere. The controls, the way that they put them in CMMC, we touch a lot of the domains, but ones that we specifically hit pretty heavily is audit and accountability. We pretty much do all of it, other than making sure that your NTP server is nice and configured properly. System and communication, we do quite a few in there, and almost all of system and information. Risk management, because we do a lot of vulnerability scans as well as part of our security assessment that we did. We do a lot of that as well.
Cool. And so when an organization comes to StreamScan, are they getting a product? Are they getting a consultant? Are they always getting both? Could you walk us through this? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we're not fixed on anything here at StreamScan. You can come in and, as I say, we just need consulting help. We need to do the whole project, or we need to just do a validation before you get to an assessment. You can come to us just for your cybersecurity needs and not CMMC or any other compliance. You can come to us for incident response, or you can come to us for all of it. The value that we offer is that we have everything in-house, that we're not having to go in and get other companies to come in to help with this part of cybersecurity, that part of cybersecurity. Or it's like, oh, we don't do incident response, we outsource it. That's not what we do. We do everything in-house. So anyway, if you need any help, I pick up the phone, I call somebody else that is in another department and say, hey, come join this call. They're talking about incident response. They want some more information, and we're right there.
That's great. Well, thanks for the overview of StreamScan, Chris. Just to share a little bit about Virtru, because I didn't quite introduce myself yet, but I manage a few of the sales teams at Virtru. On the Virtru side, we come at this at a little bit of a different angle. We're specifically focused on protecting the data itself, encrypting your data upon creation, both at rest and in transit, all using the open source trusted data format that our co-founder, Will Ackerley, was involved with inventing while working at the NSA. So I like to describe it, StreamScan helps to see and stop threats on your network. Virtru really more so focuses on protecting the data that's being shared both internally, but also more importantly, externally, and ensuring it's always protected and under your control. For CMMC specifically, Virtru is a FedRAMP authorized encryption platform. We're helping really to address the access control, media protection, and system and communications protections families within CMMC. Again, specifically for common workflows like emailing and sharing files. We don't do everything. So similar to StreamScan, we're not going to cover 100%. We don't want to claim that we do either. And we've heard from clients and prospects that commonly those tools that may say they do, when you actually get down to it, it's going to require organizations to work around specific workflows that are going to be important. So we believe in flexibility and speed is really what leads to collaboration. So Chris, can you give us a little bit of the lay of the land of where are we in the CMMC timeline, and what are some of the important milestones that organizations need to be aware of?
Yeah, so we're currently in phase 1 of CMMC rollout. We're working towards phase 2. It will start November 2026, November 10th, 2026, which will start mandating CMMC level 2 on some contracts. So it's not a deadline that you need to be certified by November 10th. I know that's kind of the what's being pushed out there. That's not it. It's not on November 10th. After November 10th, you're done. You don't have CMMC level 2 certified. You can never work in defense again. That's not true. That is it. What they're trying to do is give people time to get certified. They know that this is not an overnight thing. So if you do have that in your contracts, beware of your requirements after November 10th, because that's when they'll start mandating it on a lot of the contracts.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, I was just checking out the most recent Cyber AV town hall where they put several statistics. One is how many organizations have been assessed through a C3PO, which it was right around 1,200 or so, either passed or again the conditional pass. So still a lot of work to do. And to that point, Chris, yeah, we hear from prospects and customers that are again wondering when and why maybe they're seeing that they need to be level 2 certified. And maybe Chris, could you speak to that? Because again, organizations sometimes come to us and they say, hey, we don't handle any CUI. We haven't yet ever We don't know if or when we will in the future, but we're being told that we need to meet CMMC level 2. What would you say to that? Where is that maybe coming from?
Yeah, so I think now a lot of larger primes or OEMs, they're really coming in and saying like, hey, everybody in my chain has to be level 2, which might not be the truth for a lot of them. I think they're just sending out mass emails and just telling everybody, hey, please do level 2. Where you need to really look is your contract itself. Look in the contract. There's specific DFARS clauses that are in there that will tell you what you need to get done. Then also look at the type of data you're receiving from these contracts. If there are diagrams and pictures and PDFs of specifications, all that falls under CUI, which falls under level 2. But again, if you're not 100% sure, call your contracting officer, right? Ask him what's going on. What do I need to do? Do I have to actually do level 2? Instead of a generic email that everybody is sending out, really get in touch with that contact that you have with the company and just really, hammer it out with him and see what do you actually need to get done. Because the difference between level 1 and level 2 is really large, right? It's, level 1 can be done pretty quickly. Level 2 can take a really long time and cost a lot more than just doing level 1 certification.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Some good recommendations there. To add to that, though, could it also be that the prime is saying that, well, you may not have needed to receive CUI previously, but you may need to be prepared in the future, and that's where getting level 2 certified is ensuring that you're able to support a contract or parts of it in the future that may again require handling CUI?
Yeah, so what is happening now in the market, and what we're seeing, because we do work with certain primes that we help with their supply chain as well, their supply chain risk. And we're going to all their subcontracting, subs, and just working and saying, hey, where are you guys at? Are you guys on CMMC? Do you want to do CMMC? Do you guys want to move forward in this? To give visibility back to these large primes or large tier 1s. And what's happening is that a lot of people are saying, I don't know if I want to continue in this. I don't want to go forward in CMMC. You're sending me contracts that are 10, 20,000, and just to get assessed to it, you're looking at 40 to 80,000, right? It's not worth it for me to do it. And a lot of people are dropping out of the defense space. Mm-hmm. So what's happening is they're grabbing people who are already in their ecosystem to fill those gaps. Right? They don't want to go out and search for a new supplier or vendor or anything like that. They'd rather get somebody that's already doing it and say, hey, we're just going to give you more contracts. Now this includes CMMC or CUIs. So please get ready for that. So it could also be an advantage for some people to just, talk with them and see, hey, is there an opportunity for me to work more in defense or pick up some more contracts from you? And then, make it a business case to see if this is worth it or not.
Thanks, Chris. So let's talk about some, common examples that I'm sure we're both hearing, thinking about maybe a small to mid-size manufacturer or engineering firm that is supporting some defense contracts, distributed teams, people working out in the field, lots of file sharing with external parties. Where do you typically start when you're scoping that sort of organization working towards CMMC level 2?
Yeah, so I like to go and look at existing contracts that they have, identify ones that are military versus non-military, and then just kind of map out where everything goes. From there, we have a better view of what your needs are, what you're missing, or how you're sharing the data. We want to offer you the right solution for you, just not just our solution, right? It might not be us that is the best fit for you guys. We want to make sure that customers are taken care of and they're getting through this, quickly and the most efficient possible, right? We don't want to, a customer that's not on-prem, we're not going to start telling them, hey, go buy, $40,000 of servers and racks and switches just to stay on-prem because it's easier. Yeah, it might be for some people, but, that cost of going everything back on-prem might not be for them. Right? So that's kind of where we look at their scope and how they're sending data and how everything is moving in their system. And something like Virtru might be the best for them. We always look at what's best for the customer, not what's best for us.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, we also believe in, again, options and flexibility. Again, Virtru, we're not itself an enclave. It could be used within one that you're building, but again, we're not one of those one-stop, all-in-one solutions. But again, we hear that those can be a good solution in some cases, but often when it actually then comes out, we need to download and edit CUI. It's other things are in scope that maybe hadn't planned needed to be. So yeah, I would agree. We hear that pretty regularly too. Another thing that we hear about pretty commonly, Chris, I'd love to hear your take on this, is organizations figuring out where their CUI actually is, emails, shared drives, on-premise, etc. How do you help organizations get their arms around that?
Yeah, so the most difficult piece right now is nothing or not much is tagged CUI today. A lot of the contracts are not telling you this is what CUI is, this is not CUI. So it's kind of everywhere. What's great is that a lot of the CUI or the military data or documents that are going through are already separated in a lot of organizations. They say, oh, this is for this customer, this is for that customer. And they already have it a little bit separated. Where it gets difficult is when customers don't have any CUI or they're not sure, we're kind of going in a little bit blind and just saying, well, let's build out an enclave and just say, well, this is where everything's going to get stored, and then kind of grow it from there. Only because there's no way to figure out what it is, what is CUI, what's non-CUI. They don't have a clear view. They're not sure. They called their tier one and they're not sure either. Nobody can tell them exactly what is CUI, what's not CUI. So we're kind of just guessing, saying, well, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to protect it, so that when we do get something that's CUI, we know where it goes, we know our workflows, we know what we need to do to protect all the data.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And yeah, again, we hear that too, where we don't have any CUI today, and yeah, it's one thing to map out a plan for when we do get it, we're going to put it here in this system. But again, even identifying up front what may already be CUI that you have, and then will that workflow of it's all going to be in this one virtual environment actually be conducive to business down the road later. And that's again where Virtru kind of fits in well, where it's flexible and can be used in multiple environments. One scenario that comes up pretty often, of course, is sharing data externally. Maybe it's a technical drawing you need to send externally to a government agency. So what happens to an organization's CMMC scope once the data actually leaves their environment? What are the responsibilities that OSC has to have taken into account for data that leaves?
Yeah, so your requirements, I would say, they end the second it enters the other customer's environment. But what you need to do before even sending it, you need to make sure that they are at the same level as you. Right? So if you're sending level 1 data, well, you need to make sure the other side of the other customer is also level 1. If it's level 2 data, you need to make sure that they're level 2. So that's your immediate obligation, and it falls on you. Right? It doesn't fall on anybody else. If they lie to you, if they do anything that's not on you, just make sure you have everything documented. Do it by email, not over the phone, so you have something on paper. But once they tell you, hey, yeah, we're level 2, they can send you, SPRS score. They can send you a copy of, their CMMC certification. Anything like that to prove it to you that, yeah, we're level 2, we're ready to go. You don't have to go into their network and check how they protect their data. You don't have to do any of that. What you need to do is protect the data leaving your system, and then the second it gets to their end and they download it, it's no longer on you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we get asked that sometimes too, scenario questions where it's, what if we receive something that it wasn't encrypted to the level it needed to be? And from my understanding, it's, as you just pointed out, well, number one reminder, if you're receiving CUI, they need to be level 2 also. So they need to have safeguards in place. But that's also, from my understanding, called spillage, where hypothetically, if they weren't and they did send something incorrectly, there is a process to then go through to alert them, delete it, expunge it, log it, etc. to address that. But yeah, that's a good reminder that, CUI is only really supposed to be shared with another organization that's level 2 certified in the future, right, Chris?
Yeah, that's the biggest piece, right? Is make sure that you're protected. Do the certification properly. Don't lie to your assessors. Don't try to hide anything. Be open, and whatever happens at the next organization, that's not on you. They're supposed to be, telling the truth. So you got to trust them and make sure that, hey, you got your certification, means you did something right. We trust you. But again, if something happens in their system, it doesn't come back to you. Right? You come out and say, hey, they told us they're certified. Here's the proof that they sent to us, and you know, we didn't. We're not going to go any further. We're not going to start, testing and auditing them or checking their systems or anything like that. They got their certification. They said they were doing it right. That goes on them.
Thanks, Chris. So I know CMMC also has specific requirements around incident response and threat monitoring. So what does good look like for a small to mid-sized defense supplier, and what does not ready look like?
Yeah, so incident response is something that not many companies can do, or if they can do, they can't do it well. You need to have an expertise really in that. It's not just, hey, I have something happen in my network, I'm just going to unplug everything, and then I'll reboot it the next day and we'll be okay. That's not, yeah, it stopped the attack right away, but the second you turn everything back on, you restarted everything. So, really getting through those policies and really documenting everything. That's what CMMC is really looking for. And that's what all of CMMC is, right? It's documenting, any changes to your system, documenting your incident response plan, testing your incident response plan, and, being able to say, hey, maybe we don't have the expertise for this. Maybe we do need to find somebody external to come in and just be, a retainer. We don't have to be in your system. We're just a retainer in case something happens. Say, hey, this is over our head. We need to call somebody to come in. Be prepared because attacks are, happening more frequently. Defense companies will be a bigger target coming up in the future. And that military data is very sensitive, to the Department of Defense. So, be aware that you might not have 100% the expertise, to fight off any attacks or anything like that.
Thanks, Chris. And so for an IT team that's more historically, managing security from a reactive approach, what would be some of the first capabilities that you would recommend they put in place towards monitoring for CMMC purposes?
Yeah, so there's a couple requirements around monitoring. So they ask to monitor your perimeter. So make sure that you're monitoring everything going in and out of your perimeter. Make sure all the endpoints are monitored and they have an antivirus that's up to date. Right there, you cover a lot of the bases. You can see if anything happens. Don't go buy tools that, are just shiny. Might not be the best for you. Really make an educated decision on it. Just because, Microsoft has a product doesn't mean it's the best for you, right? It's not, none of these tools are one size fits all. Some companies like to have more hands-on. Some people like more, customer service. I don't want to talk to an AI bot for 5 minutes while, my company is burning to the ground. I need to talk to somebody today. Well, maybe I'm not going to go with a larger company. I'll go with a smaller company that when I call, they answer, and it's a human. Right? So that could be something that people look into. It's preference by company.
Thanks, Chris. Let's switch to another topic that comes up, which is around specifically needing to audit CUI. So can you speak to what are the specific CMMC practices that directly call out the need to control and audit CUI that's being transmitted, accessed, or shared?
Yeah, so all of the domain family of audit and accountability really looks at that. So what is being logged, what is being tracked, what is being tracked in the logs as well. Right? You don't just want to get a bunch of logs, but it doesn't have a username, it doesn't have anybody, you don't know who did it, right? So those are all things that you want to make sure that are in there, that you can trace it back to a certain person. So if they access CUI or access VPN, right? You have the VPN logs, and all of a sudden, that same person is logging in from, Thailand. It's like, well, how did you get from, the US to Thailand in 3 hours? That doesn't make sense, right? You have to have tools that can make those judgments for you. Make sure that everything is accountable in your system so that anytime anybody does an action, it is an approved action and you're not reacting to problems. You didn't know that this person had an access to CUI data and all of a sudden now he's extracting data, or he's the system admin who has full permissions on all your network, and all of a sudden he's downloading data. You want to be able to see that and what's going on and who can react to that. It doesn't take time, right, to get this data out. Like the second they're exfiltrating data, you should be able to know pretty quickly. And that's what these tools come in and do, right? So they alert us to any data being exfiltrated, any, anomalous behavior, any, sniffing attacks or anything like that from other countries. So we can block, we can go from geolocation, block specific countries. So no IP addresses from those countries can log in. It does sometimes cause issues for some companies that are traveling, people are traveling, and all of a sudden they logged in from US, and then the next day they're logging in from somewhere in Europe, and that block the VPN can actually be blocked from other locations. So it could cause a little bit of an issue, but you always want it to block something instead of letting malicious activity come through.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'd love to hear your take on where you see specifically StreamScan adding some value into some of these controls. Just thinking to your comment of, where Virtru uniquely fits in there is, because again, we're doing object level encryption, we're encrypting every piece of data separately with separate sets of keys. It does allow for a really true granular audit capability where you always know what's happening to your data. And then the comment about blocking things, or if there was an incident, that's really, we hear, a great use case for the Virtru private key store, where it is an option for our customers to host their own encryption keys with their own private key server. And one use case is if you were to disable that, our customer, we don't have access to it, that actually would shut down anything being accessed because nothing could essentially be decrypted. That specifically resonates, I think, with our customers. I'm curious to kind of your take around maybe StreamScan there too.
Yeah, so encrypting everything individually, it causes a lot more issues for hackers to come in, and they have to break every single encryption one by one to be able to exfiltrate a lot of the data. Whereas what we most commonly see is, hey, we just encrypt the server, and once you break that encryption, you pretty much have access to the whole server. Now, where you guys come in and do some great work is giving the option to the customer. Like, how do you want to store the data? How do you want to encrypt it? Where do you want the keys to be stored? It gives flexibility for a lot of customers. And even on our side, we know that we can set alerts to, if ever that, key goes down, we can be alerted and we know, hey, there's some major attack going on. Another good piece of our technology is, we're on all the endpoints as well. And so if we see that an endpoint was hacked, we can actually quarantine it from the network, so it won't keep moving forward into your network. So a lot of times hacks happen because people click on links and they put in passwords, and then their device gets hacked. And the second we see something like that happen, we can quarantine the machine from the whole network. We just basically cut everything off, right? So it can't go from one machine to the next, and that's usually how ransomwares start. They grab one machine, they go to the next one, they go to the next one, and then by the time you figure it out, it's half of the network is closed. And now you're sitting there trying to unlock everything. We can come in and just block that machine, close it, and it won't go further than one machine. You only have one machine that's locked. There's no data stored on it. There's nothing of value on there. And then we just back it up and reboot from there and keep working.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and you were mentioning protecting endpoints, and that's something that has come up. And I know there are alternatives to Virtru where commonly it's they're trying to show how you could maybe keep your endpoint out of scope. I think our most common scenario is we're telling people with Virtru it's going to be in. But also from a practicality perspective, I'm just curious from your experience, how often is just from what someone needs to do, where they need to edit things and handle them on their endpoint CUI? How often is the endpoint going to be in scope, and would you recommend just planning towards that? What's your take around that?
Yeah, it really depends on the type of company that you are. Manufacturers, I would say most likely, you're manipulating drawings, you're putting them into different, software, CAD software, SolidWorks, things like that. So it's already going onto your system. Um, where we see companies getting their endpoints out of scope is when they're quite small, and they're just looking at a piece, and then they don't have to write anything down. They don't have to edit anything. It's basically go build this, and it's something that's basic. It's a box of, it's 18 inches by 24 inches, made out of this material. And it's like, I don't need to manipulate it. I don't need to build. I don't need to, download it. I don't need to print it. I don't need to do anything. You can get endpoints out of scope. But I would say most companies, your endpoints are going to be in scope just by what you do day to day.
Yeah, and I've also learned that, it's one thing to plan and then get assessed for one environment to then later find out this just, again, may not work for us. We need to be able to edit it. And then you're kind of a little bit back to the drawing board where, again, where Virtru fits in is more of a flexibility approach where it can be used in multiple environments. It could be used in enclave or it could be used enterprise-wide. But thanks for sharing that perspective. I know we've talked a little bit about encryption, and that is specifically, where Virtru does fit in. Could you though remind us all, Chris, what are the specific requirements around encryption for protecting CUI? Just walk us through what those look like in practice, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so the requirement for encryption is that any encryption that you use to protect store transmit CUI has to be FIPS 140-2 validated. So it has to be actually validated. It can't just be FIPS 140-2. You have to find the module on the FIPS validation website. I know now they're moving to FIPS 140-3, coming, I think, in September or October. So I think it's going to change from there, but you need to really be on that website. It's the only thing that they will check. You can have the right encryption, right? You can be, SHA-256, right? But it has to be FIPS validated. That module itself has to be FIPS validated. You can't just say, well, SHA-256 is good. AES 128, AES 256, whatever it is. You need to make sure that behind it, that module is validated, and you can only find that online.
Yep. Yeah, and that's where it's, for example, with Virtru, everything is built to comply, but to your point, it has to be FIPS validated. And we have that right on our Virtru Trust Center, just transparently, which then links to the NIST website. So we have our CMVP certificates. And I'm curious, to that point, what are some things that you look for when you're helping to consult an organization around the encryption tools they're using? For example, do you ever come across tools that are adequate, but maybe the vendor isn't making it easy enough to actually confirm that?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of vendors that are saying, "Yeah, we have our attestation, I believe it's CAVM, but it's not valid. It's not a validated module." That's when people are saying, "Yeah, well, we're good. We're okay." But then you start searching them up online, and they're not there. You can't find them, and they're not providing any data, because just getting that, FIPS validated certification is not FIPS validated module. The module itself is not validated yet, right? It's the first step, but they're not at the second step. The second side of it is we see a lot of companies that use VPN that are attached to their firewall, which then forces your FIPS mode on your firewall. And a lot of companies don't know that. And it's a huge, huge point that has to be assessed and can cause to a conditional certification, not a failed certification. It's the only one that is allowed to be conditional. But again, it's a big surprise when you get to an assessment and be like, well, we're using, again, AES 256 or SHA-256, and be like, this is what we do. But it's not FIPS. Your firewall's not in FIPS mode, so we can't accept it.
Yeah. So recap, make sure using, and your vendor is showing you the actual validated encryption module's CMVP certificate, which again, Virtru has right on their website. And I think where some of that confusion could come from, and the next thing I wanted to talk about is the whole FedRAMP piece, because with that, it doesn't have to be authorized, for example. It could be equivalent. So I think sometimes maybe there's the mix up of, oh, with FIPS, that's also adequate. It can just be equal, but not actually authorized. So could you just remind everyone around the FedRAMP aspect, what are the actual requirements around FedRAMP when it comes to cloud tools for CMMC level 2?
Yeah, so FedRAMP is a standard that the US government created for all cloud providers to protect sensitive data. It is also the requirement when you're using it to protect store, transmit, or process CUI data on the cloud. You need to have that FedRAMP authorization, so FedRAMP moderate or high, and you need to be part of that marketplace. You need to be able to find that cloud instance that you're using on the marketplace itself. And then you would inherit a lot of the controls from there. And it's a must. You cannot have a cloud environment that doesn't have that FedRAMP certificate behind it. So if you're using something, like most companies are using a Microsoft tool, well, Microsoft Basic or Microsoft E5 is not actually FedRAMP. You have to go to the higher versions, which a lot of companies don't know. As you search on Microsoft FedRAMP and it says, yes, we're FedRAMP, but then the instance you're using is FedRAMP. So it's a lot of just fact checking and looking behind the scenes, making sure that, the company that you are using in FedRAMP, that they're actually in the marketplace itself, and not saying, yeah, we're compliant, or we have everything ready, we just don't have our certification yet, or we didn't pass our assessment or anything like that. They have to pass it. They have to be able to prove that they come through it.
Yep. Yeah, and I do know with this specifically, it's the equivalency is acceptable. So it's either the equivalency baseline or authorized. So Virtru, we are FedRAMP authorized in the marketplace. But I have heard, Chris, and I'm curious your take on just there are some differences from a just assessment perspective between using something that's either FedRAMP equivalent or authorized, and maybe if you could speak to that from your understanding.
Yeah, so when you're authorized itself, the assessors are looking at what the FedRAMP solution closes, and then they take that and they say, okay, great, you close all these points. Where when you have the the attestation or the equivalency, they still have to do some checks to make sure that everything is okay. So you get an advantage by working with a company that is already assessed and certified.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, you mentioned and you all be in Canada. I know this has come up where one big hurdle for the Microsoft commercial cloud is that, to your point, it's not FedRAMP. If you look up just Microsoft in general, yes, they have authorizations, but it's only specific instances, the GCC High. That's not always an option for a company, just whether they have infinite funds or not, or technical ability, right? There's instances where organizations are not able to purchase the specific SKUs. So could you speak to that from your experience, just maybe working with Canadian organizations?
Yeah, so to be able to get Microsoft GCC or GCC High, you need to have a US person, so it has to be a US citizen, and then you also have to have a US based location. So you have to have both of those to be able to get access to a GCC or GCC High instance to then be able to host the data properly, and then you can do your CMMC from there. The problem is in Canada is a lot of us don't have a second location. Small mom and pop shops that don't really have anything on-prem. We're just working out of SharePoint and OneDrive and stuff like that. Are really having an issue now is we can't get on to that, and the cost of it is also pretty high. But the difficulties also is, here in Canada, we're also doing a similar CMMC program. And if you get a cloud instance, that's FedRAMP, you can also get a Canadian cloud. You have to get two, right? So there's that too that companies have to look for as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I think, of course, by now it's becoming more aware that, again, GCC, GCC High are not the only options. When it comes to meeting CMMC, there are third-party tools like a Virtru, for example, as well as other options too, enclave providers. But we specifically, again, being that we're not an enclave Virtru, we have organizations that are using, for example, just our secure share product within GCC or GCC High, just as a easier alternative for sending and receiving files. We have organizations using the commercial cloud, but using Virtru for, again, email or our Collaborate to store CUI at rest and organize it. Where essentially you're able to take that, Microsoft commercial cloud aspect of the scope. You won't use OneDrive or SharePoint because, again, it's not FedRAMP, but these are trade-offs that are usually more affordable and faster to implement. So good for everyone to know that there are truly options out there, but not something still that everyone knows. So switching gears a little bit, Chris, when you've consulted with organizations and then maybe been involved with their assessment, when you see a customer using a tool like StreamScan for MDR and network monitoring, how does that change the conversation and help around the specific families that you guys are supporting?
Yeah, so we have a share responsibility matrix that we will share to the customer and also to the assessor. And we will let the assessor know that, hey, they're inheriting these controls from us. Also, it gives a little bit of a break for the customer when we're in that week of assessment. Say, hey, I don't have to answer these questions. I've just been grilled for the last 3 days. Now it's StreamScan's turn to get asked some questions. So you get a little bit of alleviation of pressure there. We'll work towards getting all the evidence ready that you need. We'll make sure that everything is configured properly and it's set up properly, and that the documentation is done right, and it's all done by us anyways. So when you get to an assessment, you're looking at, okay, well, 40% or at 40 or 43% of the way there, StreamScan is getting us there just by their tools. So the customer gets to it and said, I only need to hit 50 to 60%. And I don't have to go too much further, and I don't have to stress about answering all these questions, because StreamScan is there and we're there during the assessments as well. And we help customers go through all of these, all the policies, all the domains, every single control and assessment objective. So we also have the answers. So we're there to, as a backup. We don't want to sit there and answer every single question for the customer. It does look bad if we do that, and then it looks like the customer doesn't know what they did or what they're doing. But we're there as a backup, and it's good, safety net for a lot of customers.
Yeah, I think similar, we also, of course, have a shared responsibility matrix at Virtru, and we have the kind of key pieces of documentation that we provide to customers, and again, we have mutual customers who have already been assessed and achieved level 2. And I always say that no news is good news, where we've had countless organizations pass their assessment and we didn't even know they were getting assessed. Of course, we would like to know. So plug for any Virtru customer. Feel free to let us know when you book your C3PO assessment. But I think that speaks to just the ease of use, or rather ease of implementation, the simplicity around vendors that you're selecting, the FedRAMP authorization. Would love maybe, Chris, if you could just share for those who are familiar with StreamScan, just kind of what the implementation timeline looks like, complexity at a high level.
Yeah, so there's different options that we offer, right? Traditional consulting, just, call us when you need us. It does take the longest. You're looking at least a year, depending on the company and timelines that they're in. Getting our tools in place, just our tools and our consulting together, you're looking at probably closer to 6 to 8 months to get ready. And then our last, type of product is not an all-in-one, but it's pretty close. But we only do it for on-prem. You're looking at 8 to 12 weeks to get that ready.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Why don't we move over to some questions? The first question we had is, how are you providing evidence of separation of duty?
Yeah, so in that control, so control 3.1.4, the first part, you need to write out which duties need to be separated. The second part of it is you need to assign those to different members. And the way to prove it is show the security groups and the permissions of those two users to make sure that they're not in all the same groups, that they have all the same access. Well, you're not really separating anything. A lot of times what we do to show this is we say that the person who is approving access to CUI doesn't give the access to CUI. So we separate it by IT versus a manager. Right? So they send in a request to be approved to join the CUI group. That gets approved by a manager, and then an IT administrator enforces that. Then you can show IT admin doesn't have the same access as the manager, and the manager doesn't have access to the IT side.
Thanks, Chris. Related to that, around just kind of, asking about some of the specific controls, could you speak to, are there some controls that from your awareness are almost impossible for a third-party vendor to take over or to inherit? So I guess said another way, what are some of the controls that definitely the NOSC is going to need to actually do by themselves?
So a big part of it is the physical side. Now you have some tools that will help you get there. Right? You have cameras and you have alarms and you have door lock systems, but they don't get you certified just by having those. You have to have the policies written and all that stuff. Everything else you can pretty much get it externalized. It's really that the physical piece that no one can really come and do it for you unless you get a security company to come in and start putting up fences and posts and say, well, we're inherit your controls because we're doing this. I don't think I've ever seen that out there in the marketplace.
Thanks, Chris. Specifically for Canadian companies, are there any specific requirements around where the keys are hosted or where the data is stored that would impact CMMC?
So it depends. It depends on how your system is kind of configured. Now, just doing CMMC itself, the data can be exported. So it falls under export control, and then it falls under a similar program like ITAR in Canada called Controlled Goods. And then you can have the data on-prem. But if everything is in the cloud, then everything has to stay on the US side in the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, I think that wraps it up for today for the questions. Again, thanks, Chris, for joining. Very insightful comments around where StreamScan can help, as well as Virtru into an organization CMMC journey, as well as just what to expect, some hurdles to consider. I would speak for both of us that, both organizations are here to support you. If we don't know the answers, we'll find someone that hopefully does, but appreciate the time, Chris. Again, anyone looking to speak with either Chris or myself, please feel free just to reach out to us via our website. And we'll see you on the next one, Chris. Thanks again.